Today, we're looking at one of the most famous and controversial arguments in the entire history of philosophy, Blaise Pascal's wager. But we're not just going to look at it as a religious idea. We're going to explore it as the very foundation of modern decision theory, a method for making rational choices when you're staring into an uncertain future. The core of this whole breakdown is this one provocative question. Are you forced to take a side on the existence of God? Is staying neutral even an option? And here is Pascal's brutally direct answer. He says we're already on board the ship of life. We exist and we have to act. Choosing not to choose is, in itself, a choice. You can't just sit on the fence, because in this game, there is no fence.
Okay, let's dive deeper into this. Pascal's starting point is that pure reason can't prove or disprove God's existence. We're caught in what he calls radical uncertainty. It's like being in a game where we don't know the rules, but we still have to place a bet.
This is such a critical point. Pascal is saying you are not choosing between knowing for sure that God exists or not. That's impossible. The choice is between betting that he exists or betting against his existence. Both are wagers, with profoundly different consequences.
And this leads us to the mathematical core of the argument. Pascal was, after all, a brilliant mathematician, and he formalizes this choice using what we now call decision theory. Let's see how this logic of infinite gain is built.
Here's the key concept: expected utility. Think of it like calculating the real value of a lottery ticket. You don't just look at the jackpot, you multiply it by your chances of winning. Pascal uses this exact same method to analyze the biggest wager of all. To make this crystal clear, we set it up in a decision matrix. You have two possible actions, to believe or not to believe, and there are two possible states of the world. Either God exists or he doesn't. This gives us four possible outcomes. Now, let's fill in the outcomes. If you believe in God exists, the gain is infinite, eternal bliss. All the other outcomes, whether you lose a few earthly pleasures or gain a life of freedom, are finite. They have a limited value. And that single infinity symbol changes everything. And here's the calculation. The expected utility of believing is the probability that God exists multiplied by infinity. So long as that probability is times anything more than zero, no matter how microscopically small, the result is infinity.
So, here's the crucial point. If rational decision-making is all about maximizing your expected utility, and the utility of believing is infinite, while the utility of not believing is finite, well, then there's only one rational action. The math seems to force us to conclude that believing is the only sensible choice.
But it's not that simple, of course. The very power of the argument, infinity, is also its greatest weakness. Now we're going to see how this mathematical trump card creates some serious, almost paradoxical problems for the model.
Infinity kind of breaks the standard rules of decision theory. For example, it means that, rationally, you should sacrifice everything you have for even a tiny chance at an infinite gain. Even weirder, the model can't distinguish between a wholehearted believer and someone who only believes on Sundays. Both get an infinite payout.
But the most famous objection is the one that seemingly crushes the entire argument. It was popularized by the philosopher Denis Diderot, and it's elegant in its simplicity. Which God are we supposed to bet on?
Look at how the matrix just explodes in complexity. If there are multiple, mutually exclusive religions all promising infinite reward and perhaps infinite punishment for disbelief, you're suddenly facing rival infinities. Choosing Christianity gives you infinite gain if it's true, but maybe an infinite loss if Islam is true. And this leads us to a mathematical black hole. Infinity minus infinity isn't zero, it's undefined. The calculation breaks down. The decision-making tool can no longer point to a single rational action, and the entire wager seems to collapse.
But is the argument really dead? Maybe not. Let's move on and see how we might revive the wager. The idea is simple. Maybe not all wagers are created equal. Maybe some have better odds than others.
Defenders of the wager, including Pascal himself, argue that we don't have to treat all conceivable gods equally. We can prioritize based on criteria like historical evidence, documentation, and tradition. A religion with thousands of years of history seems like a more serious bet than a god invented yesterday. The philosopher William James gives us a fantastic psychological filter here, the concept of live options. He says that for you as an individual, not all possibilities are real psychological choices. A hypothesis has to have a certain spark of credibility for it to be a live alternative.
This illustrates the point brilliantly. For many people today, the choice between Christianity, another major world religion, or atheism can feel like a genuine live choice. But betting on the Norse god Odin? For most, that's a dead hypothesis. This dramatically reduces the many gods problem down to the few alternatives that are actually real for you.
This leads us to the wager's deeper purpose. Maybe it's not meant to be a final, logical proof for God's existence. Maybe it's meant to be something else entirely, a rational permission slip to start an existential experiment.
Here is Pascal's most shocking and practical advice. To the person who is convinced by the logic but can't bring themselves to believe, he doesn't say, think harder. He says, act differently. Start practicing. Go to church, use the holy water. He claims that the action can come before the feeling.
The point is this: you can't choose to believe on command, but you can choose to perform actions that make belief more likely. The wager gives you a rational reason to start that journey, to live as if you believed, just to see where it leads you.
So the wager is just the first step in a 4-stage process. First, you're intellectually shaken by the risk. Then you choose to act. Through habit and practice, your feelings and your intellects change until, according to Pascal, you can achieve an authentic faith that no longer needs the cold calculation to survive.
And that's where we leave you. Maybe Pascal's wager was never meant to be a final answer. Maybe it's an enduring challenge, a reminder that in an uncertain universe where reason has its limits, we are all forced to choose. We have to bet. The question isn't if you will wager, but how.